And of course, for the audience, it's very hard on how to recognize quality information. So, what I tell people is like, if you really want TRT advice, listen to the guys who've been on TRT for decades.
So you mentioned so you found a 25 gauge 1.5 inch needle.
Yeah,
That's
those have
awesome.
been around for a very long time. Yeah,
it's a Lauer lock, and you can just plug it into another syringe.
Yeah, you just put it into a syringe, and they even have a 29 gauge.
Nice. Look at that.
And a 31 gauge, but a 31 gauge is very scary because it's almost like an acupuncture needle. And I'm always scared that it will break internally, so I've only used those a couple times. And then, afterwards I was a little bit too scared. Plus it takes forever to pin through.
Definitely. So on those notes, I had jotted some questions down related to dialing in aromatase inhibitors on TRT. Mm-hmm. Assuming you're somebody, let's call it 150 milligram dose of testosterone a week, and assuming you've put the injections super close together, they're either every day or every other day. Mm-hmm. Assuming you eat a bit of cruciferous vegetables, you're even taking something like diindolylmethane. If you're still recognizing that libido and erection quality is not as good as it could be, or, God forbid, just bad with E2 at like 30 or something, and you need to get it kind of down in that 18 to 25 picograms per milliliter range, how would you, a long-term or long-time kind of expert steroid user and bodybuilder that's obviously had years of experience modulating estrogen, how would you go about dialing 8X in 150 milligrams a week, assuming you've done everything else correctly?
All right. So usually in this case where people are in TRT and it's like just a genuine replacement dose and their estradiol is still okay. Like a 30 is not high. 40 is high. Right. 50 is high. 60, then you run into trouble. So 30, I would say that that's nicely in the middle of the reference range, balanced to your reasonably high testosterone levels. And of course, if your testosterone is at the top of the range, ideally you want your estradiol to be at the top of the range too. The problem is where most men forget about, dialing in their hormones completely, is that they're just taking testosterone, converting into estradiol, which you're missing out on DHEA, you're missing out on pregnenolone and all the intermediary hormones, the androstenediol and androstenedione, right? And everything in between. So most guys would benefit from adding in a little bit of HCG, right? You leave your estradiol right where it is, 30, there's nothing wrong with that. But you add in HCG to help with all these little hormones that you're not supplementing with, just producing them directly in the testicles. And that way, most men notice that their libido is actually fantastic, even though on paper, their estradiol might end up being 40, 45, 50, 55, know? So libido and erection quality are different things. They seem to go hand in hand, but again, bringing HCG in the mix is going to make you pump out more estrogen, right? So instead of sitting at 30 in that particular case, it's probably going to go up. I've seen in those cases it go up. So again, and assuming that a person has experimented enough to know that at 30 they're having erection quality problems, and maybe they're dosing DHEA and pregnenolone, just an exclusive 8X dial protocol. Like, how would you go about that? Assuming the neurosteroid thing isn't the issue, because it does seem to be the issue for some people. They can bring in HCG and it resolves the issue, right? But for some guys, it makes it worse. How would you start dosing Arimidex, right? Because this is such a point of confusion out there, I found. And I guess it has a lot to do with the fact that it's a very sensitive drug and people respond to different doses of, and people obviously are aromatizing differently. It's like, how would you start? What would your starter dose be? And then how would you then dial it in? Would you run labs in a day, 3 days? How would you do that? So I would start with maybe 0.25 milligrams Arimidex twice a week, Monday, Friday, for example. Yeah, give that about 2 weeks and then see if that improves. And then you can always go to a third tablet, right? Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So, since it has a 24-hour half-life and a 4 to 5 day active life, technically you don't need to dose it every single day or every other day, but it's still better instead of really crushing your estradiol, with a single milligram dose, which is what the TRT doctors prescribe, right? You do the cookie cutter 150 milligrams of test once per week. And then on the day you take 1 milligram of Arimidex and, good luck. We'll see you in a month, right? That's how the TRT doctors do it. Right? Bye-bye.
Basically.
Yeah, they actually want you to get side effects so you stick around longer.
Maybe.
I think so. So
Yeah.
I would advise, like, if you're already doing 3 injections per week or every other day, on your injection day, you take 0.25 milligrams Arimidex, but you start with twice a week. And then maybe 2 weeks later, you increase it to 3 times per week, right? And you give that 2 weeks, and then you go in for blood work, see where your estradiol ended up. Because the problem with overshooting with these aromatase inhibitors is that suddenly your estradiol is like 10, and man, then your libido is horrible too. And then you're moody, a little bit agitated, and you have dry skin and squeaky joints. And dude, I've seen you feel like a granny right away. You're like postmenopausal estradiol levels, So
absolutely.
Yeah. And hot flashes and all that stuff, right?
Yeah. It's crazy. You shouldn't feel like that.
No, you shouldn't feel like that. You're turning yourself into a Karen. So you got to be, Arimidex is really to be respected, and same as Aromacin, low dose, 6.25 milligrams 3 times a week or twice a week, and then take it from there,
Yeah.
It's,
now the half-lives are a little confusing, right? So like, anastrozole, the reported, I believe the FDA document has it somewhere around, 60 hours or something. But I guess it seems to be, depending on people's metabolism, between 40 something and 60 hours. Then you got this whole terminal life thing. So, you need a couple half-lives for it to be completely out of your system. Have you seen that in that post half-life period that there are still, anastrozole binding to the heme iron of the aromatase enzyme and still inhibiting estradiol in like day 3, day 4? Have you seen that?
Yeah, it still does. It still does, but to a lesser extent. You got to remember, let's say, if you inject every day, you constantly top off your testosterone, right? But you get less aromatase inhibiting effects. So maybe in the beginning, you bring your estradiol down too much. And then later in the week, your estradiol already starts to shoot up. So that's why I think it's beneficial just to take smaller dosages, but multiple times per week. And then you give yourself about 2 weeks, sometimes 4 weeks, depending on how you feel. Like if the issue resolves itself after 2 weeks, okay, then you probably are at the sweet spot. And then it doesn't really matter what your blood work says, because maybe your blood work now says it's 20. And then you get, maybe that's too low. And then you start micromanaging and adjusting further when it's not necessary. So you have to treat the patient ultimately. And you got to keep in mind, guys, that estradiol also contributes to prolactin production. And that's ultimately why libido and especially erectile quality goes down quite a bit. But prolactin goes up from so many things. It can go up from smoking weed, or taking kratom, or GHB, other recreational drugs, or watching too much porn. Right? You're masturbating too much, and now your prolactin is chronically elevated, and you can't even get a hard on, when it really matters. So there's so many things that go into it. That's why libido and hair loss and acne are so complicated sometimes. Because it's definitely you want to tackle the estradiol. But it's not the root cause in many cases.
Right. It's a good point about bringing up like how prolactogenic it is. I mean, it past a certain threshold, it will literally force the lactotropes in the pituitary to make more prolactin. Now, prolactin's under dopaminergic control largely, but it's also under estradiol control. Like there's a research paper that shows us with basically a pretty molecularly similar version of estradiol. It's the estradiol that you use if you're treating a woman like with estrogen, fed to rats pretty consistently induced pituitary tumors in them. And they also found in some anastrozole studies that anastrozole in combination with a dopamine agonist like cabergoline work in tandem to lower the size or reduce the size of a pituitary tumor, because estradiol interacts directly with either, I believe there's some estrogen receptors, it's ERB or ERA in the pituitary, but also interacts with the D2 functioning in a way which, like, estradiol desensitizes the D2 receptor in the pituitary. So the combination of them together markedly reduced prolactin more than just the D2 agonist, which is crazy.
Right. So of course, the last thing you want to do is kind of start using chronically cabergoline or some of the other dopamine receptor agonists, the ergot-derived ones, because that leads to all kinds of other side effects, left ventricular hypertrophy and, issues with your memory. Yeah, so It sometimes can get very, very complicated, but I think usually for TRT guys, like the easy way is usually the best way, because overcomplicating it will just send you down a spiral of opening up
Totally.
Pandora's box, and then before you
Yeah.
know it, you're like 10 different drugs. When in reality,
Absolutely.
all you needed to do was just watching certain aspects. So that's why, for the guys that are just checking their estradiol, please check your SHBG, check your DHA sulfate, check your prolactin. And then based on all of these hormones, you kind of make an assessment on what's going on, and then you make the adjustment. Because otherwise, you might, shoot somewhere where it's not really the right approach.
Right. Definitely. Yeah. I mean, that definitely, that's a perfect segue to what I think is the TRT community is a very high information community, right? And I think that this is a good thing, but it's also a bad thing, because in the context, right? It's in the context of trying to keep it simple. Like, I think you're totally correctly sort of like implying here. You've got all this additional information that is coming in to never dose AIs, or, you have to dose AIs. And then, HCG comes into the picture, and the discussion about DHA sulfate and pregnenolone and all this stuff. But then you got camps that are battling back and forth. What I think that this high information environment does is not only confuses people into kind of being hypochondriacs and trying too many things and not waiting long enough in order to see like a balance in hormonal profile, but I at the same time, it ends up with people on too many drugs that are targeting the side effects of something that they just learned from the internet that they should do. Like you got guys that are dosing Cialis, and look, I think Cialis is a pretty awesome drug, but some of them may have just taken all this information, like some of the really high estrogen guys just let their estrogen go, and then they basically have no erection quality, right? So then they're on Cialis, and it just becomes way, way convoluted. At the same time, this
I know
whole,
exactly which YouTube channel you're talking about.
there's a couple of them, but there's a couple prominent people, right? And it's like this whole high information thing is good for everybody to be educated on what they can try. I think you have to understand that if you're going to be doing experimentation at the highest level in response to this new information, you've got to be running labs and you have to be careful. But at the same time, and I think it's good for people that are willing to do the labs and be diligent about it. But what I see happening is it makes guys on TRT question doctors, which I think is a healthy amount of questioning of doctors is good. But at the same time, it'll make guys on the testosterone subreddit, they're just like, they think that your local endo, or even a guy who's essentially a TRT doctor, is an idiot. And look, he may be prescribing way too much 8X, or he may be prescribing one shot every 2 weeks or something. But you got to remember, that guy's seen a lot of data. That guy looks at a lot of labs and a lot of blood. You know what I mean? So he has a general understanding. He has information that you're missing from the individual perspective, listening to other people parroting information on Reddit. So there's good things in that you can really dial a protocol in, and you really get to see, 15 picograms per milliliter of estradiol, and I feel like total crap. You get to see that, but at the same time, and that's good, right? And you get to see, hey, too much 8X, or even for some people, any amount of any of the aromatase inhibitors just make them feel bad. But at the same time, so it's a good thing, but at the same time, it just convolutes everything,
Yeah. So and of course for the audience, it's very hard on how to recognize quality information. So, what I tell people is, like, if you really want TRT advice, listen to the guys who've been on TRT for decades, right? They've seen everything.
Right.
They've tried every other protocol. They know which protocol works and which one doesn't. And especially if they actively do consultations like doctors do consultations, then, besides their own blood work, they've seen so much blood work of other people. So, even though I'm probably not the poster boy for TRT, because I used to do, heavy bodybuilding cycles, I have seen blood work quite a bit over the last 15 years. And I do know that, generally speaking, with TRT, it's usually the hormonal imbalance that starts causing these problems and the hormonal fluctuations. And then, on a side tangent of that, most guys that start TRT, they use it as a crutch. And a lot of people are going to hate me for this, but I think that TRT is the new midlife crisis sports car.
Yeah.
You know,
I love
and
it.
I hate to say it, but a lot of guys are like 40 years old, 50 years old. They've accomplished everything. Oh, my libido is a little bit low. Oh, my energy levels are a little bit low. You know what? I can't afford a Ferrari, so I'm going to go with TRT. And that's totally cool. That's totally cool. But it also brings a lot of people into the space who are simply not educated or ready enough for it. Okay, their testosterone levels are low. I get it. But why don't you try to optimize your health first, right? By following a diet and going to the gym and taking some supplements and taking care of your beer belly and stopping smoking and or whatever else you're doing, right? Address the health first. And then you'll see that once you start TRT, that all these side effects that all your other fat-bellied buddies are experiencing, you're not getting it because you're in a good state of health. And maybe your testosterone improved a little bit, but it didn't get any better. So I still feel that testosterone is earned. It's very meathead, of course, like back in the day, back when I was younger, you had to, bench 3 plates and squat 4 plates and deadlift 5 plates before other people would talk about steroids, right? So you had to at least accomplish that. Now, the internet nowadays, nobody gives a shit and everybody's on steroids. But I do think that you need to have fundamental insight into your health and improve that and give that maybe 3 months or 6 months. And then you'll see that it will pay off, right? You now adopt this new lifestyle. And then when you sprinkle in a little bit of TRT to take you to the next level, all these common side effects that people that watch all these TRT channels get, right? The gym pop, cookie cutter, I want my sports car, but I can't afford it, TRT crowd. All those guys with all those weird side effects that you see in the comment section, you will not be one of them because you manage your health. I promise you. I promise you,
Oh, it's a big part of it, a huge part of it, man. Definitely.
That's why it's so problematic to go to Reddit or some of these forums because everybody's hiding behind anonymity and you can't look at them, and even in some of the TRT YouTube channels, like there's guys which are morbidly obese talking about TRT. They're, I wouldn't take advice from them.
No, not at all. And Reddit, you're right about Reddit. It's like you don't see, first of all, you don't see their labs. I mean, if they're posting them, maybe you get to see them, but it's like you really don't get accurate reporting of symptoms either, So like when a guy is going, hey, I went on 8X and like I'm having joint pain or something. Well, you don't even know like if the dude doses fish oil, if he's working out, if he's doing anything else relative to
maybe he's not drinking water, it's like rheumatoid arthritis and all these little things,
Precisely, dude. You have no idea. So that's what makes it difficult when you're somewhat low information going in, which admittedly everybody is, but then, you go and are deciding who to trust. Like, it's like you just, unless you're seeing, I say to people like, when I'm in little spats or arguments or something, or just discussions about estrogen and testosterone or whatever on forums, I say to people like, look, it isn't true unless I can see your labs and I can get accurate reporting of your symptoms.
Exactly. Yeah. That's why I always say, pull the labs and then you make the adjustments because otherwise your symptoms it could be anything, dude. It could be anything. And especially these guys that are behind anonymity or the guys who are clearly unhealthy. I run TRT and I go out drinking and I let my estradiol run wild and blah, 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 blah. All these weird stories. And then, of course you're going to get side effects, dude. Your life is a mess. You should get your life in order and then you can add a little bit of TRT. I hate to say it, but some guys are just not ready for it. And it's the same as driving, let's bring the car analogy back into it. You step into a car, but you didn't get your driver's license. I mean, you're going to crash. It's that simple. You're not used to it. You don't know how to operate this thing. There's all these, the steering wheel, okay, giving gas, that's easy, right? Shifting, that's a little bit more complicated. Turning on the butt heater, to excite the girl that you're with in the car, like that's next level stuff, right? You have to be driving. You have to be driving for a while before you find that button, and then 10 minutes later, the girl's like, "Oh, why am I so hot?" Right? These little things. Now you know how to operate your car, and it's the same with TRT. That takes a little while. So I think for most people that are looking for information, go with a couple YouTube channels of guys that have been doing it for a while, guys that you respect. Guys that have been in the game, guys that you can see face to face, guys that offer consultation, so you can actually ask them questions. And And then, in the end, the buyer is the chooser. So if you get a bad result from taking some of the advice, unsubscribe and go find your information somewhere else. It's a free
Definitely.
market, right? It's a
Yeah,
free
totally.
market. So
Oh yeah.
you
Yep.
know, and
Absolutely, man.
I've helped over the last couple of years so many guys that started their TRT haphazardly, and then after a while they're so messed up that they have to do a 1-hour consultation with me, which is pricey. Your prices are up there too, but by the time they mess themselves up, they're like really at the end of the road and they're ready to spend the money to get fixed. And guess what? You get that email 1 month later and everything is resolved, or 2 months later and everything is resolved. I've been struggling with this for 6 months.
I know, right? For a while. Sometimes it just requires the right amount of guidance. And sometimes the guidance isn't necessarily super complex. It's just you've seen it over and over and over and over again. You look at the labs, you look at their symptoms, and you kind of know which direction they should go in.
Right. And they need a little bit of confirmation because they're they're a little bit on the fence on what the direction to go, because again, there's paralysis by analysis.
Certainly, it's a big problem.
I'm very fortunate that I started on the steroid forums, where the information was so bad that you had to piece it together yourself, because otherwise you knew you were going to get messed up. So I started way lower than everybody else. But it's ultimately it's a huge learning curve, and the more you learn and the more blood work you pull, the better you get at managing your own TRT. And I think within a couple of years you probably know better than a doctor, but you got to keep in mind, these doctors, they're bound by their medical license. I mean, it took them 10 years, 12 years, 15 years to get. Do you think are they going to risk their medical license so you can take your Cialis? Get out of here, dude.
I
wouldn't do it.
Right. Yeah, no, it's a good point. It is. Their doctors are interesting, right? Because I mean, they're very myopic. They're also very dogmatic in what they have seen to be true. But I think, and I think that's a good and a bad thing, but it's like, you got to know when to request the help of a highly educated, but also coupled with a lot of experience, MD, because I sometimes will reach out to a highly intelligent endocrinologist that I know, just for certain things. Like, you got to know when to use their expertise, which is like them sitting out the 50,000 foot view, having seen all this for many years and looking at labs, and then also when to take matters into your own hands, because there's something they're not seeing. Like you said, after a couple of years, you kind of are much more tuned in than your doctor relating to your physiology. There's just no question about it.
No, doesn't mean that you know better on the subject, right? Because you know better on your body, but doesn't mean that you're an expert on TRT. That is
the distinction.
For that, you need to see 1,000 bodies, not just your own. So that's why I always laugh that. So personally, I sometimes have a little bit of a gripe with general practitioners, because they they don't really refer properly, because they have very limited information, but on a lot of topics. But the experts, like the gynosurgeons or the cancer doctors or the cardiologists, I mean, those guys, man, they literally save lives. So I could never take away from their experience. And then sometimes you hear something that you don't like. Okay. Right. But there's always another cardiologist or another surgeon that you can talk to. And then maybe they will say the same thing, and then you are at fault.
Right.
They have a little bit more to learn,
Yeah, those guys are precision experts, and there's you hope to find a precision expert in whatever endeavor related to physiology that you're engaging in, but either way, finding them is awesome. Now, I wanted to quick segue into PFS and PSSD. These are sexual dysfunction syndromes that are likely caused by either things like Finasteride and also from SSRIs. Now, you and I have discussed this before. I got recruited to work on PSSD specifically many years back, because I'm the neurotransmitter guy, right? I'm focusing on nootropics, and that whole community has been very stuck on the notion that because it was an SSRI and because that was serotonin, that this is the basis of the issue. But people forget, prolactin is under serotonergic control, negative serotonergic control, frankly. And that downstream, some of these drugs are affecting hormonal balance. So And on top of that, the only people that have actually been able to get better from these conditions were people that we got the hormone markers in the right place for them, and then we stayed there. So what is your take on, PFS, which is post-finasteride syndrome, and PSSD? What would you suggest to a person that is coming straight off of any of those drugs and are noticing sexual dysfunction? What would you have them do?
So just to be clear, like post-finasteride syndrome is of course a medical term, coined by lawyers so they could make lawsuits, right? Let's get that clear first, because it's there's no post-dutasteride syndrome, but actually there's more instances where people have issues with dutasteride than finasteride, because dutasteride has, a clearance rate of months. So while the finasteride might stay in your system for a couple of days, dutasteride is there for months. So you really have long-lasting libido issues if the lack of DHT and allopregnanolone is really the root cause. So what 5-alpha reductase inhibitors do, they prevent the conversion of testosterone into dihydrotestosterone, but also progesterone into allopregnanolone. And then these 5-alpha reductase 5-alpha reductase enzymes, especially type 2, they also help with cognition and neurotransmitter synthesis. So you have to understand that even though your DHT might still be in range, your allopregnanolone might not be, and your neurotransmitters might still be whacked. And for you to completely alter your genetic, how do you say this? What's the word for this? Epigenetic makeup, where you produce less 5-alpha reductase enzymes with chronic use of finasteride and dutasteride, you might have to bring your 5-alpha reductase enzymes back. And if you continue to use like ketoconazole shampoo, which also goes systemic, not only prevents this the metabolism of finasteride and dutasteride, but it also continues to inhibit these 5-alpha reductase enzymes. So again, you have to look into the total picture. And sometimes, sometimes you just think it's post-finasteride syndrome, like we talked with the estradiol, right? But actually, you got hair loss because you were in a micronutrient deficient state, and so you're on testosterone. You're increasing your micronutrient requirement. You bring your DHT down, right, which regulates libido and just well-being and sedation to a certain extent at night, and now you're completely unregulated again. Again, the hormonal balance is off. And, for the guys that you got to understand that, these enzymes, whether that's aromatase enzymes or 5-alpha reductase enzymes and all the other enzymes in the body, they're dependent on nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. And as you age, or an NADP, NADPH, as you age, these levels go down. So maybe your libido is going down because you're just getting older and you're not getting enough enzymatic reactions in your body. So you might be able to fix all of that with nicotinamide mononucleotide or nicotinamide riboside to increase your NAD plus levels. I don't know, it's very far-fetched, but I made a video about post-finasteride syndrome. Yeah, I made a video about this post-finasteride syndrome where I try to explain what happens when you go on finasteride and dutasteride. And then people started supplementing. You know what? I don't want to take all these hormones. I start supplementing with NMN. You can buy it. You can still buy that, right? It's not banned yet. You can still buy it. So they started supplementing with NMN, and then you get the messages like, dude, it fixed everything in 2 weeks. So yeah.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah. Right. So
that's beautiful.
So it's super far-fetched. It's like on the other side of the spectrum. You're focusing on DHT, but in reality, your NAD plus levels were just too low. So
it's what you did in that particular situation. This is what I love about biohacking and this advanced level physiology stuff is like you went much further down the rabbit hole into enzymatic reactions and cofactors and these kind of things to understand what is happening way sub just the 5,000 foot view DHT level.
Yeah.
That
can't find
awesome.
that on Reddit.
No, you're not gonna. Yeah, I always found that dealing with conditions like that or trying to help men to get out of them, it does require a much more granular approach. And it's rarely neurotransmitters that are in fact, I've really never seen for PSSD at least, neurotransmitter manipulation work, but it's always been downstream and it's been the hormones, right? But also then, like we were talking about before, like dialing on all these hormones is another thing. TRT plus HCG is not just TRT plus HCG. No. It's, dialing in your testosterone so that you're in the post-therapeutic range of 800 plus, but then also dialing in the HCG dose so that like you bring an HCG into a testosterone protocol and you're going to be making both more tests and more estrogen, and then like you were saying, it's all the neurosteroids and stuff too, and then potentially estrogen control. So it's just these things require you go, I almost think about it like when I think back to like anatomy classes that I've done, right? And like looking at the instructor that is like breaking down the cellular components of everything. Right. There's a guy on the internet named Ninja Nerd who, if anyone wants to really get
these lectures, right? Yeah,
dude,
I love that
they're
guy.
so. Yeah. It's like I have an insatiable thirst to watch all of them because the guy breaks it down in visuals at a cellular level, and so
he's very good.
It's that kind of nuance that you must. Which I admittedly I understand is hard to do, and no one wants to think that deep to fix theirs. You want to take a pill and get it better, but sometimes it just requires that you get that nuanced about it.
I think so. And if you don't want to learn that deep, then well, schedule a consultation, and guys like Ryan or Steve will fix you right up. You know, and there's plenty of guys out there. They're just too busy to do the research themselves. They're intrigued. They love our channels, and otherwise, okay, they have post-finasteride syndrome, and they watch maybe a video from you or from me, and they're like, you know what? Instead of watching another 400 videos, let me just give this guy a call. And yes, you know, in most cases, you just fix them right up. So, you know, with SSRIs, it's a little bit more cumbersome because I'm not that familiar with the neurotransmitter side of SSRIs. You know, what I do know is that most people need to phase them off reasonably slow, right? Don't do what I did when I came in fluvoxamine, like cold turkey, and had the brain zaps and the, you know, the fucking focus issues. Like, thank God that's all resolved now. So it took about a month. And weirdly, because my TRT was so completely dialed in and optimized, I had no sexual dysfunction. Zero.
Yeah. I mean, that's why. That's. I mean, I almost think it's a prerequisite. Like, it should be a prerequisite if you're going to go on an SSRI to have hormones dialed in and in the right place, and know how to manage them in case you start feeling, you know, things go wonky.
Yeah, but that's not what the doctors want. You feel poor libido. Okay, you feel a little bit loss of manliness, and you take an SSRI. It's easier to manage for them. So that's why sometimes I'm like, maybe TRT first and then an SSRI. You know, a lot of neurogenesis. I love taking fluvoxamine. I'm not going to lie.
You mentioned that last time we talked.
Great on it. You know?
I love that, man.
The funny thing is, some of the effects are longer lasting. So. Like, I remember that sometimes a little bit agitated, you know, when I was on cycle and stuff. And then, of course, it's the super physiological amounts of testosterone that you're on. And now that I'm off cycle and I'm off the fluvoxamine, I feel that some of these positive, like, mental state effects are still there. So it's, you know, you're like in a good perpetual state of happiness. Now, a lot of people post-finasteride or post-fluvoxamine would not experience it like that. So, again, maybe it's the nicotinamide mononucleotide that's getting the job done. You know, when you're biohacking, you're always biohacking something. So, you know, I'm off compounds, but not off all of them. Totally. Unfortunately, right. So,
great topic.
With SSRIs, it's you know, it's cumbersome, but phasing it out, I think, you know, if you want to, that resolves more issues than just stopping it cold turkey. And it might mean that the phasing out process is like 6 months, it's 9 months for some people, you know?
Yeah. Right. You know, I never thought about that. When I saw your PFS video, I thought that was super interesting because, you know, one of the distinguishing factors between you and I is you look at metabolism a lot more, right? And the metabolic enzymes and how which enzymes are responsible for clearing which drugs and how long, you know, like I never would have thought that, what did you say? Finasteride or Dutasteride? Finasteride, right? Stays in your system for that long. I never would have thought that, you know, whereas you looking at it from that perspective, it's like you had this advantage of understanding that, hey, you may actually still be inhibiting 5-alpha reductase, and then you may need to do something to upregulate 5-alpha reductase thereafter. I mean, it's just super interesting stuff.
Yeah, that's why it's always so unfortunate when people get these side effects because they wanted to address one issue, right? You take the finasteride, Dutasteride for hair loss, right? That's the most likely cause. And then they get 10 times more side effects. And now they need to, you know, really go down the rabbit hole to fix it. And it's really unfortunate, but it does happen. But usually, you know, to be fair, I know more people who run finasteride without issues than people I know that use finasteride and got, you know, post-finasteride syndrome and their dick doesn't work. So
absolutely. It's like how many positive experiences are you going to see versus negative? Like on the internet, it's almost exclusively people yelling about the problems that they've had versus their positives.
Yeah, but then we have to dial back to being anonymous on Reddit and just complaining when you should have gotten healthy
exactly.
in the first place. Like honestly, dude, like hair loss is you can address that with so many things. You don't need to.
Mm-hmm.
But I do understand it because like there's companies promoting here on YouTube, and they say, hey, just take these Finasteride. Well, our doctor prescribes it for you.
Yep.
So all these guys take it uninformed and have no idea what the potential ramifications are.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate,
Definitely.
man. Just so the bottom line is basically get super educated before you put anything in your mouth. And and that takes time, so you have to be patient. If you have side effects, then you have to be patient to do the due diligence learning, and then you can take some. Yeah,
definitely. On that note, we were talking about modafinil, and you're the first person that's brought up the fertility issues with modafinil. First of all, what did you expose or pull out was the primary mechanism of action there? I mean, is it fussing with the Sertoli cells at some level? What is it doing?
No, it's probably just acting as a reactive oxygen species. And that's the case with many of these medications. So, there's a lot of stuff. I didn't dive into the modafinil versus fertility that much. I didn't get to that part, but I quickly did a Google search, and I consulted with ChatGPT real quick on particular drugs, which is not the best way to do research, obviously, but it's a very quick and efficient way. And then, I listed all the drugs I was taking to see if they have a negative effect on fertility. Then you run that quickly through PubMed and Science Direct and Google Scholar, and you read the abstracts. Because sometimes you need days to really research one topic. So I had to pass like 50 different drugs through this filter. So I realized, okay, now I'm doing the steroids separately and the TRT separately, and then later on I will do the modafinil and the Adderall and all that kind of stuff if people still want to see it. But from what I quickly researched, I saw that modafinil had a pretty bad response on fertility levels, and I suspect that it's purely due to oxidative stress, which is what most drugs actually do. So the reason why I came off fluvoxamine, for example, is because most of the SSRIs have a negative effect on fertility, and the large majority of the causes is because SSRIs lower hormonal function. So your LH goes down, your FSH goes down, and downstream, your intratesticular testosterone goes down. So this reduces semen parameters and semen synthesis. But
and test.
Yeah, and test, right? So everything goes down. But when you liquefy these SSRIs and you add them to semen directly, they cause a lot of oxidative stress. So that means basically you need to eat the whole box of fluvoxamine for you to get the same concentration of fluvoxamine in the seminal vesicles where the semen is stored before ejaculation for you to get a similar effect. So the evidence is a little bit wishy-washy sometimes. And I think it's the same case with modafinil. The deleterious effects are when you throw in 100 milligrams modafinil into your semen sample and then all the semen die. Now, but you will never get such a high concentration, again. So I can't say it with conclusive conviction that it's super bad, but from the quick research that I've done, it's probably not the best way to do it. So I came off of it, and now I'm on copious amounts of L-tyrosine, and I'm still cognitive.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, you bring up a good point about it's like the difference between modafinil being like sitting at cells versus you administering it. But I think you have enough information there if your focus is fertility to just step back a little bit, right? And to further research it more. And if you're taking modafinil to not take it, like, I've talked about modafinil for many years because look, it's helped me do a lot of things, in the earlier stages of building my previous company, I was taking modafinil a lot, and I was running 16, 17-hour days with this technology company. And that's like what led me into building the Cortex stack and the Torque stack, our other nootropic stacks, because I'm like, well, I want something alternative. Like I'd like to not be taking modafinil every day, but there are certainly side effects. There's side effects with, I think, most nootropics if you dose them wrong, but certainly the more powerful borderline stimulant, / potentially could be labeled as nootropics. They're made to be exceptionally effective. And when they're made to be very effective, there's no biological free lunch, right? Like you got something else going on.
Yeah, you're gonna have to punch in the card somewhere.
Exactly. Exactly. Your use of uridine interests me because when we
Mm,
talked about it, you were mentioning that 2 or 300 milligrams gives you some solid focus. I
mm,
wanted to ask you if number one, do you still take uridine, and secondly, have you noticed any long-term benefits to your baseline in terms of
mm.
cognition, all the cognitive processes from taking uridine, even when you don't take it? Because, and
Yeah.
I'll kind of just follow that up with, for certain nootropics, and this is obviously very hard to prove, I
Mm.
have noticed benefits when I don't take them anymore. Like Noopept is a good example that I
All
took
right.
for
Mm,
4 years or something on and off back in the day. And prior to that, I was terrible at reading comprehension. And after that 4 year stint, I was way better at reading comprehension, reading 50
mm.
page PDFs and remembering everything that I read. It's like this stuff happens. So have you noticed any longer term benefits from using uridine or no?
Probably. Like, I came off most of the medication nootropics, like modafinil and some of the other ones, right? And now I'm running uridine monophosphate when I need, that extra motivation and L-tyrosine and, combination of things that are, formulas, right? For example, from Gorilla Mind or something like that. And yeah, I do notice that, during the day when I don't take it, that actually cognition and overall focus is better. But I always have in the back of my hand, maybe that's because I don't train like a crazy animal anymore.
Yeah, right. Could be.
Because I used to I used to be the king of the gym. Like maybe when you see me now, you wouldn't say that. But a couple of years ago, when I was like full-time bodybuilding, dude, I would literally destroy the gym and max out all the machines and mix out all the weights and then put chains around everything because it wasn't heavy enough. And that would
Right.
be my
Wow.
2 hours of fun. And then I could come home and I would literally be a zombie. And I'd
Yeah.
have to take modafinil because there were no alternatives. I'd
Yeah.
have to take modafinil just to get some sort of productivity done. And now that
Yeah.
I'm more into the entrepreneurship and managing the YouTube channel, I got too much going on to really train that way anymore.
Yep.
I noticed that my cognition is certainly a lot better. And of course, I've shifted to nootropics like uridine
Yep.
monophosphate and L-tyrosine, a little bit of L-theanine and ginkgo biloba, and all these little teacrine, all these little things to kind of take low dose, but in combination to get maximum benefits of all of them together.
Yep.
Yeah, and even when I don't take them, I feel certainly a lot clearer,
Yeah.
mentally. But I think it's partially because I took cerebrolysin, and partially because
Yeah.
because I took Semax for quite a long time, and I took
Yeah.
an SSRI for almost a year, so that's a decent amount of neurogenesis. And
Oh, yeah.
now that I'm off of all of that, I would say that maybe the uridine monophosphate contributes to that, but how much on a scale from 1 to 100? Man, it's so hard to quantify because I
Yeah.
experimented and took so many things, to
Right.
improve my cognition over the last couple of years. So
Yeah.
maybe you can explain me a little bit more in depth because you're the nootropics guy. So what have you noticed after?
I've noticed a lot of things with the uridine specifically. It's opening up the density of dopamine receptors, right? So that
Mhm,
just potentiates the effect of dopamine at the D2 receptor and the D-like family receptors. And so what I notice when I don't take nootropics is that, and again, TRT's in the mix now, but this
right.
happened. I started noticing this way before getting testosterone in the mix. Is that my ability to do some of the things that I like to do and that are required for me to be productive, like
Mhm,
heavy cerebral processing work, like the
right.
consumption of scientific literature, it is better, scores better than before I was using nootropics. I mean, I was
Mhm.
utterly terrible. Like I remember reading books, like
Yeah,
you
I
know,
remember.
and being like confused about what the hell is happening in the book, especially a story, right? Because like the whole
Mhm,
page prior, like I just would forget and I couldn't
mhm,
synthesize any of the information. And then after using Noopept for 4 years on and off, I mean, I was cycling and I wasn't dosing
mhm,
it every day. I noticed that like consuming scientific literature and consuming long PDFs or something was so much
mhm,
easier for me to retain information. With back to uridine, like the dopamine receptors, again, hard to quantify because you're dosing other nootropics at the same
mhm,
time, but my motivation like my zest for life and my drive to tackle things as a
mhm,
man and get things done was better, especially post like the first couple years of dosing uridine semi
mhm.
frequently. It's
Right.
like, what did I do there? Right. It's neurogenic too,
Mm-hmm.
especially in combination with things like CDP choline,
Mm-hmm.
and DHA and fish oil. There's a lot of papers on that. But at the same time, this whole dopamine receptor thing and dopamine signaling optimization, it's like I would wager that I made some positive, created some sort of positive environment where that whole system is just functioning better. And like there are
Yeah.
days, again,
Mm-hmm.
pre-TRT that I don't take nootropics, and I'm like, I feel my brain is working awesome.
Yeah. Oh, that's good, right? So you get a long lasting effect. And whether
Yeah.
that's like epigenetic response regarding the dopamine receptors or just
Right.
overall neuroplasticity and just retraining your brain to really dig into the literature and learn,
Mhm.
in a new
Yes.
capacity. Because like, they always say like, general population says that, it's easier to learn a language when you're young because you have higher neuroplasticity. But
Yeah.
we have nootropics for that. So that
Yeah.
means you can learn how to learn faster and better
Right.
and more efficient and improve memory formation and recollection of that memory, even if it's like months ago, like some obscure things that you remembered from reading a paper, 3 years ago. Like, oh, wait a minute. And you
Yes.
can recall that entire paper.
Yep.
Yeah, that's 100% nootropics. And I think that
Yeah.
TRT, or at least superphysiological levels of testosterone or higher levels, I think it contributes highly because, testosterone and dopamine have an inverse correlation. So high dopamine means usually higher testosterone levels, and higher testosterone levels, whether that's naturally produced or exogenous, that also means higher dopamine levels. And if you use uridine monophosphate to kind of, improve the receptor binding and the receptor response, then yes, of course, that's a lot of synergy. You're maximizing every avenue. And what happens, entrepreneurship is leveled up to the point so nobody can catch up with you. That's what I love about nootropics. Yeah. People you leave people in the dust.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The Nootropics world is like, I mean, I think the regular folks that are out there that aren't into this stuff are dosing either things that are somewhat similar to nootropics in their energy drink, or
Mhm.
they're dosing like 5-hour energy, which actually has nootropics in it. But and they rely on that stuff, right? I mean,
Mhm.
caffeine, one of the oldest nootropics in the book, but like the guys that are building companies, and whether it's you with your whole kind of bodybuilding and TRT like empire and all the stuff that you've done, or it's the Silicon Valley like programmer guy who's like building the next mobile app or trying to or whatever. They're using nootropics, guys. I mean, they recognize that there is a way to have a cognitive edge if people find that they can perform and function for 7 hours straight with minimal breaks versus 2.5 hours straight with the necessity to take breaks and not being able to focus. Like, they're going to do it, man. So definitely people at the highest level are modulating brain performance, for functionality.
Oh, yes. And that's why I'm really looking forward to that new series of yours, Smart Drugs or Not.
Yeah.
Because that first episode that you did on Elon Musk, that was very, very good. You break it down so scientifically, like, okay, he's stuttering a little bit, but he's still verbally fluent. So maybe he's probably not taking Adderall. He's not taking modafinil. I love that video, man. I hope you can do a lot more. It was absolutely fantastic. I think? What you remember our last podcast, right? I asked you about guanfacine, which is a medication that works on the alpha-2 receptors in the brain and increases blood flow, but it also induces sedation. And it's prescribed for kids who have ADD, ADHD. So what it wouldn't surprise me is that Elon Musk
was taking that.
Yeah, as a younger kid, like he's a highly entrepreneur guy. And when you see those early videos when he was with PayPal, right, and still in South Africa, you see he was a lot more energetic. Yeah, right. Yeah. But he was a lot more hyper back then. Of course he was younger. So I'm like, if it's anything like you tackled it perfectly. But I've taken guanfacine a couple times, over the last couple of weeks because I wanted to experiment. And I realized that, okay, if you take like a high dose of nootropics, a little bit too much tyrosine and a little bit too much uridine monophosphate and a little bit too much caffeine, right? So you're basically double scooping, and then you take guanfacine to kind of take the edge off. Then it's literally like everything gets compressed into a tunnel, and it's insane.
I love that. Yeah, that's like, I mean, that's the notion of like, there's a similar notion in the world of nootropics where you have a stimulant and a balancer, right? You've got something that is toning excitatory neurotransmission up, noticeably, like acetylcholine, dopamine predominantly, and then you've got other compounds in the same stack that are enhancing the levels of serotonin mildly or bringing more GABA into the picture. And then what you usually end up with is just like you said, I mean, it's like you're still functional, but you're in much more of a flow state.
Right. Yeah.
You know, flow is flow and focus, and in some cases, verbal fluency is like it's having your brain be sped up at a noticeable capacity, but a balancer that's in there too, slowing things down, not in a way which negates the power of the stimulant, but it's just a balance, right? And both elements of that, hypothetical stack, like, are necessary. You need them both to reach that good flow state.
Yeah, and it's very rare because it's sometimes a little bit difficult to balance, all the little ingredients. But once you get there, man, you can get a week's work of week's worth of work. Sorry, too many W's. Done in a couple days, So that's why I like it. But I do think that it causes a little bit of a toll because all these neurotransmitters, you're firing on all cylinders basically. And then at one point, one of the nootropics or the balancer is starting to metabolize faster than the others. So you either get sleepy, you crash, or you're super heightened to the point at the end of the day you still can't sleep. Like the good old Reddit stack of low dose Adderall and low dose Valium, for presentations, right? That's the one that makes you crash.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's a good point that you bring that up, because the delicate balance is also like a very important sort of topic of nuance. Like, one needs to be conscious of that. And sometimes it's a moving target. You can find a perfect stimulant balancer stack that'll work well for 2 weeks. And then, like you said, something goes wrong or something just tips the scales in one direction in the, in the relaxation department. I mean, maybe you did some other things that are now making you make more GABA. Who knows, right? And then that same stack that used to work really well doesn't work as well. At which point you got to kind of dial back and look at it. Well, what did I do? What did I bring in that was maybe increasingly GABAergic or serotonergic that helped tip the scale? Or again, is the metabolism of the compounds, the half-life specifically, different between the compounds? So you've got, some of the theanine kind of still left over, whereas the stimulant is completely out of the system. So, that's a good point.
Right. Yeah. And then you get this sedating effect from theanine to kind of calm you down, but you're too calm. Now you're like, why am I not productive after 6 hours? You get upset because you were in such a good flow state. It's because some of the dopaminergic drugs are already out of your system. Yeah. Yep. And of course there's, up until now, I don't think there's like a slow release formula. That would be great.
No.
Though, if you can get like a slow release of something like this, and then you're just like, fucking flow state 12 hours a day.
Absolutely.
You'll be divorced though, because you'll just be working.
You won't want to spend time with a wife.
Yeah, exactly.
Hilarious, bro. Yeah, they hate that shit too, man.
Oh, tell me about it. Yeah, tell me about it.
Yeah, I think the closest thing to that maybe transdermal patches. I'm looking into it for Cortex Labs. Like, I'm launching a new version of the Cortex stack in July. What is it? July timeframe, which is going to be a focus and flow stack. And then I've got the Torque stack, and they're good. Like, people really love those stacks, but I want to bring something, I guess more, I want to evolve upon what I've done so far. Right. And so I've been looking into transdermal stuff, and like, I don't know if you've ever taken nicotine patches, but the technology that underlies the sort of constant distribution of nicotine in the bloodstream, it is a technology, right? It's this film. It's not just a patch that has nicotine and then there you go. Otherwise you'd get this bolus dose and you'd start throwing up right away. So there's technology related to a sort of even disbursement of what could be nootropic chemicals into the bloodstream. I don't know how long this is going to take me to fully figure it out, because that's got to be bulletproof before it goes out to the market, but I'm working on
it. You'll probably be the first to deliver that.
I hope so.
And then I can see you running around at one of those Silicon Valley conventions and just start randomly slapping patches on all these high-level CEOs. Say, call me tomorrow. Yeah.
Right? How do you feel, bro?
Yeah. How do you feel?
Like,
tell me how you feel tomorrow.
Dude, I felt awesome.
Yeah, I think you sell out like really, really fast.
ASAP, man.
It was so funny.
All right. So switching gears, because you're the hormone guy,
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a question about HCG.
Mhm.
So, first of all, look, if you're trying to get fertile and you're doing everything else
Mhm.
right, diet wise and regimen wise, but your clinic or your endo that you deal with, wants you to take Clomid,
Mhm.
and you can't really find, or it's just a little harder to find HCG, but you would rather take HCG because, I don't know, maybe you heard about the the ocular side effects of taking
Right. Mhm.
Clomid, or or you don't want to, like, selectively inhibit the pituitary or the hypothalamic,
Both.
estrogen receptors.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, you don't want to do that. Like, you just want to agonize the LH-FSH receptors. How would one go about getting HCG prescribed? Do they find another endocrinologist? Are
Mhm.
there telemedicine, options for that? If your clinic doesn't prescribe that, if say you're
Mhm.
on TRT, what would you do?
So if you're in the United States, you're in luck because some of the telemedicine clinics can actually prescribe that, even though there was a little bit of a scare tactic recently about telemedicine not being able to prescribe it. Otherwise, you have
Yeah.
to go in for a physical within 30
Right.
days, which now, due to pushback from the community,
Yeah.
is going to be
The
postponed.
comments.
So
Totally.
one win for the TRT crowd. Like, I'm proud of you guys, whoever signed those papers on the government website. So that's going to be postponed, or maybe never incorporated. So
Right.
find a TRT clinic that is willing to work with you, right? Find a TRT clinic that is local, or at least national, right? Because you always have TRT clinics that service multiple states. So I'm sponsored by Merrick Health. They have they service multitude of states, and they can prescribe HCG in cases where it's
They can. Okay.
required. Right?
Didn't know that.
Yeah. They can. So it's not always required, right? They might rather give you different suggestions, but if it's available and you can, in negotiation, you can discuss that with the primary healthcare physician, then or the patient care coordinator, then I'm sure they can do it. Now, that only covers a couple states in the United States. If you're in Holland, I don't think there's a TRT clinic that is going to prescribe you HCG. I might be mistaken because I haven't been in Holland for such a long time. But it's the same here in Thailand. The TRT prescribing hospitals, they don't do HCG. So this brings guys that want a little bit more out of their TRT into a predicament. What is the next step?
Right.
The next step is sourcing that online and taking a risk, either through importation, getting your package seized, and maybe you get a seizure letter and you have to pay a fine, or the package never arrives, you lose money, or the package arrives too late and the potency of your HCG is very, very low, or the package arrives fast, but the HCG is not HCG, it's something else. Like, it's like a growth hormone releasing hormone, or GHRP6, something like that. And if you source well, and I got articles on my website describing how to source these kinds of products online, vigorsteve.com, bookmark that site if you're into TRT. You can easily find reliable places to buy that. And then, again, the importation risk is still there. But once you find a suitable way, then, outside of your TRT script, you have to get a little bit resourceful. And once you're resourceful, then you can basically get anything you want. Within certain limitations. Like Adderall is still hard to find online. But HCG is reasonably easy to find if you can't get it prescribed from a TRT clinic. And there's several TRT clinics worldwide. Like in Canada, it's difficult to get TRT, but some of the progressive doctors can prescribe TRT and HCG and DHA and pregnenolone and all that stuff, right? But you just have to search and keep looking until you find that clinic that is willing to help you, that cares about your health.
Yeah, I think a clinic is probably a better bet. I've gone UGL with HCG before in the past, before I got on TRT, just to kind of fuss with it. And it was awesome. But at the same time, their projected delivery date was like, I don't know, it had come like 3 weeks post the projected delivery date. And it's like, I think I watched a video of yours sometime prior, which was discussing like the potential denaturing of the proteins or something in it. So, so I just didn't know, like, it certainly seemed effective, but with UGL and things of that nature, you end up not really knowing what the hell you're getting,
No. So that's why I prefer to stick with pharmaceutical grade sources. And even that can denature in transport. I mean, if it comes from a hot country and then it goes into the cold airplane, I mean, you got to remember all the packages that go into the belly of the airplane, it's freezing in there. It's super cold,
Right.
So if your package is on the outside somewhere and it's just pressing against the hot metal, then yeah, of course it might, denature to a certain extent. So you're always at the mercy of transport. But if you find a way to get it in right, then yeah, you can basically source whatever, But then importation is always a risk and it's cumbersome. Yeah, but that's the unfortunate reality of 2023. There's presidents who don't like HCG or other biologicals,
right?
And there's countries who are completely against steroids and demonize it, even though you're producing these hormones naturally in the body. So you can't even take more of what you produce naturally. The next logical step would be to banish tears and pee and poop. Right, that's also produced in the body. Yeah, that's also banned.
Yeah.
Hey, can't cry anymore, dude. Yeah, straight to jail. Yeah,
that is hilarious.
Infrared cameras at fucking movies and stuff. So,
wow.
If you want your life to, have any meaning, you're just gonna have to take matters into your own hands, and then sometimes you just gotta say, "Fuck it," I'm gonna take the risk. Yeah. And otherwise, come to Thailand, where there's very minimal risk.
There you go.
These kind
That's
of things,
the solution, folks. Yeah, Thailand it is.
Thailand it is, yeah. And there's a lot more fun stuff to do here also. So you can deal with the side effects that HCG will give you.
Right. Absolutely. Oh, I get it. I believe me, I get it. That's funny, man. I guess the last question I had for you is, we touched on injectable L-carnitine. A lot of my audience was super interested in that because I had never heard of that before, or obviously talked about it because I'm usually taking Alcar and between 400 to 800 milligram doses, which is very effective for me. But I have guys that can take upwards of a gram of acetyl L-carnitine and really not get a potent effect. And so for those people, the injectable L-carnitine may work. I forget if you, first of all, I think I remember you saying your dose was around 3 grams. So correct me if I'm wrong. And then secondly, you dose that stuff subcutaneously with an insulin syringe or what?
So that was 3 grams orally. So that's L-carnitine L-tartrate, which I would recommend 3 grams orally. So that's 500 grams with meals, or maybe 1,000 milligrams 3 times per day for the similar bioavailability. But for the injectable version, I would say 500 milligrams once or twice per day is more than enough. And if you take L-carnitine injectable form twice per day, that's usually around the workout, right, to facilitate fat loss. But you can also take it as a nootropic. And in that context, I think 250 milligrams sub-Q is more than enough. And you can actually dose that maybe every 4 hours if you want to. And it works so well with a ketogenic diet. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's literally like you take NCT 48, from that Limitless movie. You inject it and you feel your brain just literally open within 30 minutes. And it's so nice, And if you have carbohydrates in the picture, it doesn't really feel the same. You really need to be in ketosis. So I take it before fasted cardio and before the workout. And then I usually have my 3 most productive hours afterwards. And then a little bit later in the day, if I need to, I might dose a little bit of nootropics, like uridine and then L-tyrosine, that kind of stuff, to do, other kinds of work. But I really like carnitine. Yeah, it's like you take the cap off of your mental capacity. And but you need to go with the injectable version. And keep in mind, guys, that the injectable version is post-injection pain is not very pleasant. It does burn. Yeah.
You mentioned that. You mentioned that last time. I think it may be a trade-off that folks are willing to take, but hey, watch out for that.
Right. So that first injection, you'll like, Steve, you motherfucker, I didn't know it was going to be this bad. Right? You'll be cursing, right? And then after a while, you get used to it. And with consecutive administrations, you actually get less of an effect. I think, whatever, maybe the nerve endings die or something. No, I don't think it's that's the case. But, it does get better. So I've been, I have my favorite subcutaneous injection size, usually around the upper glute and hip area, because that's the last place that it's visible. And there I barely get any issues from 500 milligrams L-carnitine. Now, keep in mind that most of the L-carnitine on the market is only 200 milligrams per 1 milliliter. So if I'm saying 500 milligrams, that will be a 2.5 milliliter shot. And that's quite a bit to do sub-Q. So for the
Right.
guys that are going to start looking like, oh, this sounds like a good idea, please go with the high concentration versions of 500 milligrams per 1 milliliter or 1,000 milligrams per 1 milliliter. Those are available too. Ratio Pharm is actually pharmaceutical. 1,000 milligrams L-carnitine per 1 milliliter. I have no idea how this is spended, but that's the highest concentration you can find. And
Interesting.
yeah, it goes in like butter because it's water-based, and then it burns like battery acid. Yeah,
good analogy.
So, yeah, get ready, but you'll get used to it, and the benefits are like nothing else. Yeah,
cool. That's insane. Yeah, I mean, injectable nootropics. Like when I heard you say that, I was like, what? And then, but looking into it, of course, you would have figured that out by now. You know what I mean? It's like
that's my expertise.
I didn't know how deep you've kind of dove into like, cognitive performance, but of course you have, and that's just something that, from my perspective, sure, I've dosed like sublingual nootropics and stuff, but predominantly it's oral dosing of nootropics. I never thought that you could sub-Q dose, effectively a nootropic and get brain benefits. You mentioned the whole keto thing. So you think, so is that because you're basically operating with more fatty acids in the bloodstream at the time, and that's why that happens?
Yeah, and more ketones, so you have better absorption of the ketones and the fatty acids into the brain, right? And of course, if you have adequate amounts of Estradiol, then the L-carnitine will just recombine in the brain after permeating the blood-brain barrier to help with acetyl carnitine levels and perhaps acetylcholine levels as well.
Yep.
Right. So you literally feel like, especially in a fasted state, you do your cardio, you get some fat loss out of that. But you also get a lot of liberation of these fatty acids. And then these ketone levels go up. So you have very high ketone levels in the morning. And then you combine that with L-carnitine. Man, it's a very pleasant feeling. And it's not stimulatory. It's not forced. Like some of the, modafinil always feels a little bit forced. Like you have to. You have to work. You have to sit down. You have to do this routine. So fuck you, get it done.
Absolutely.
That's what modafinil feels like. And then you feel like that for like 12 hours. But like this, it's like, okay, you sit down, you do your work, will allow you to open up your brain and just take it all in. That's literally how it feels. It's like you get like a little bit of brain massage. That's how it feels.
Love that, man.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Now, I guess last question on that. So you mentioned that you're in keto a good bit of the time, and you're doing carb refeeds like on the weekend or something, or whenever you do them, which I think is really great, because I think a lot of folks hear the benefits of keto, and look, there are many of them. I went keto for 9 months, and initially I had some great brain performance, and I took it too far though, and wasn't really doing carb refeeds. I got stuck in a dogmatic way of thinking, and this was about 12 years ago or something. And eventually had to recognize the necessity to bring carbohydrates back in, which, resolved the issues that I was having largely. But, that is so explain your carb refeed. I mean, how many grams are we talking about? Is it 2 days? Is it 3 days? Is it just 1 day? And then I assume you go back to keto for the next week or so?
Yeah. So basically I do like a refeed every Sunday. But when I say refeed, honestly, I used to do like clean refeeds with rice and quinoa and oatmeal, and protein pancakes and this kind of stuff. And now, honestly, Sunday is my off day. I go out with my wife. I eat something that has carbohydrates. So that might be a pastrami sandwich. That might be a hamburger with fries. That might be a pizza, like we discussed earlier. That might be pasta. That might be sushi. But I keep it modest, and I try to keep it, as healthy as possible. So not a boatload of carbonara sauce with a ton of oil. Right? I still try to make healthy choices. So the reason why I like the refeed is because mostly for the muscle tissue and the metabolism. So of course you have brain glycogen stores. That's just a little bit. You have liver glycogen stores that usually depletes overnight, and then you have skeletal muscle glycogen, which is something you need to replenish every week. Because if you go to the gym, right? If you follow the lifestyle, you go to the gym, you do some fasted cardio, you deplete that glycogen in a week, right? Unless you had 1,000 grams of carbs on Saturday, but you probably also get fat. So don't do that. Maybe 300, 400, 500 maximum. That's more than enough. And then you have your liver glycogen stores, which will kind of deplete the next day or 2 days after. Your brain glycogen stores will literally be gone the day after you wake up, because you go into REM sleep and you burn through all of that reasonably fast. And then the skeletal muscle glycogen stores will stay there for consecutive workouts until the next refeed on Saturday. Now, at one point you get so fat adapted that you can actually reintroduce carbohydrates during the week. And then it doesn't kick you out of ketosis. And if it does, it's only for 1 or 2 hours, which, after your main workout of the day, how productive are you? You're usually just watching some YouTube, catching up on emails, and then you need to sit down, catch your cognition again before you're ready for another 4-hour session, right? So why don't you have a little bit of carbs in the form of fruit? Some pineapple, some papaya, some watermelon, some banana, something with a lot of micronutrients. And then you have maybe 40, 50, 60 grams of carbs from that. You'll be out of ketosis for 1 or 2 hours. Maybe you take a nap. By the time you wake up, you're back into ketosis. You take your favorite nootropics, and then you got 4 solid hours left of the day. Yeah, man. I mean, I trained today from 9 to 11, right? It's 1:30 now. I took a meal, I took a little nap, and then I took some nootropics, and I'm ready to talk to you. And I'm good until 4 o'clock in the morning. So it's strategy. Yeah, right. You got to, dude. Entrepreneurship means you're busy 24/7. So you every minute of the day you got to maximize. Yep. Once you found the formula, then you can get so much done. But ketogenic diet, I really like it. Is it the best for muscle gain? Is it the best for like crazy pumps and fullness and vascularity? Probably not.
Definitely not.
No, definitely not. But like at one point that most guys would not settle for that anyway. They'd probably settle for having 2 more productive hours, and for the 2 more productive hours, then keto is 100% the way to go. Yeah.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, it seems that people seem to do well that as long as they're doing carb refeeds, and the back to the whole the discrepancies of information relating to TRT, and Astrozole and estrogen. It's like you got dogmatic camps, and there was the longest there was a very dogmatic keto camp that was just like, look, carbs.
Devil.
What were they saying? Absolutely. Every grain imaginable, just like the demonization of fucking bread and all this shit. And like I get that there are heavy preservatives in lots of bread, but it's like at the cellular level, if you understand this stuff, glycogen is a very important element of that. It's just like you can't just continuously starve yourself. There's some literature on people essentially inducing insulin resistance in the absolute exclusion of carbohydrates. You just don't want to go down that route.
Yeah, glucose intolerance and insulin resistance. Yeah, and then you just get fat from eating this carnivore diet or exclusion of carb sources. So I think a balanced approach is the best. And if you figure out which foods your stomach digests the best, right? Some foods just don't work for me, so I don't eat them. But I'm not excluding entire food groups or entire macronutrient groups. I think, the people that do that, they mess themselves up with nutrition. They ate processed foods for a long time, and then they get so dogmatic because whatever protocol they're following, whether that's carnivore or vegan or pescatarian or Mediterranean or
they feel so good on it.
Blood type diet or whatever. And then they feel so good, right? Because now they finally follow a structured diet. And then whatever they were doing in the past, nobody should do that. That's the worst. No, but they overdid that. You can still eat a hamburger and pastrami sandwich every week. I've been doing it every week for years, and still end up healthy, and still end up lean, and still end up cognitive. So this extremist, it's I know it's exciting. You feel like you are part of a group of extremists, right? But there's better groups of extremists to be a part of,
Definitely.
Than these silly food Nazis. It's so silly.
It is very, very silly to sit and watch them, arguing in the comment section. It's like, when you've been there and done that, right? When you've been dogmatic about something and then recognized you were wrong, some of those keto guys had like walked back a lot of their suggestions. They're like, I started bringing carbs back in and whatever.
I had to bring honey back into my diet, right? Right, Paul?
Something, right? Whatever it is,
I know you, Paul. Paul, you're fucking full of shit.
Yeah, exactly.
It was so bad, dude. Yeah. All these oils and... Yeah, and of course now he changed his tune a little bit because he also understood that you can't exclude carbohydrates the entire time because you fall apart, dude. I mean, and people that go back in time, using like ancient man as a and that as an excuse, like ancient man had 1,500 nanograms per deciliter. No, that's not true.
Right.
You know, and we only ate meat. No, that's not true. We ate whatever we could find, you know.
Absolutely.
But now you can find everything in the grocery store.
Right. That's part of the problem, right? Yeah. But I think back then we were probably doing all kinds of balancing between, you know, different macros. And then, you know, the whole fat adaptation thing, it's like, yeah, it is a real thing. It's just something that you don't want to, you know, consistently do in the without any carbohydrates at all. So yeah, balance always ends up, you know, working. I get guys that come to me for consulting, having fallen into the, you know, drank the Kool-Aid basically of either carnivore or keto. And they're maybe consuming some of the older information of guys that haven't quite come to the table and said, hey, look, you know, I'm eating some carbs are necessary and whatever. And their serum aldosterone is all fucked up, or they piss, you know, they piss too much. Their electrolytes are skewed and they have to like eat 5 grams of sodium a day. And it's just like not the way to go, man.
Yeah, no, I know. So find a little bit of balance and you'll find that in this balance, you enjoy life a lot better. And then you don't feel the reason to start arguing with people online because you're just, you feel so good about yourself and you don't want to project all this negativity that is no longer there. That's what people in a miserable state of mental well-being do, right? They want to project their negativity outwards. And that's what you end up arguing with. So you don't even entertain it. You focus on your own health. And then you're like, you know what? I actually feel good all the time. Yeah. Fuck these people.
Yeah. I love it, man.
Yeah.
That's the way to go. You know, find what works for you and all of this stuff that we've talked about and see what applies and see what doesn't apply and find your good homeostasis because the body likes being in a great place where it's used to what you're doing and everything functions well.
Right. And of course it takes some trial and error and you just got to figure it out and keep maybe a little bit of a diary or something. You know, what worked and what didn't. But dude, if you treat it like a job, like the most passionate hobby that you have, like this optimization, like male optimization. So it's whether that's your beard or your hairstyle or your intestinal health or your brain health, right? All these little things you can optimize. And yes, it might take a year or 2 or 3. But once you do, dude, I mean, quality of life is so good, you know? Yeah. And then all this Western world drama that doesn't affect you anymore, you know?
Right.
So you're like,
it may take some time.
Yeah, it may take some time, but once you're there, you're good. And then all the little drama just bounces off of you, you know? So I wish that stayed on everybody. Absolutely.
Yeah, a serene state of being. Totally. Yeah, exactly. Getting that dialed in place. That's where you end up. Well, listen, Steve. This has been an epic podcast. My audience is going to love this. I wanted to extend the opportunity for you to share where people can find you on the web. Because look, guys, I mean, I know a lot about TRT, but when it comes to some of the more advanced stuff, like this guy is the expert, especially as it relates to anabolic steroids and bodybuilding. But I mean, as you heard us discuss, I mean, Steve has a wellspring of information related to some of the deeper dives in physiology, like enzymes and you know, some of these weird conditions induced by, drugs that people are taking. So where can people find you if anyone wants to kind of book a consultation or kind of get in touch with the stuff that you're doing?
So it's very simple. You type in Vigorous Steve in Google and all will be revealed.
All will be revealed. I love it.
So yeah, it's basically Vigorous Steve on YouTube, Vigorous Steve on Instagram, vigoroussteve.com, Vigorous Steve on Podbean, TikTok, man, I'm everywhere now. Because that's how you get the followers, right? So if you want to find me, just Vigorous Steve something, or maybe you can add me in the title, and then that's the easiest way to get to my YouTube channel. And
definitely will.
Yeah, subscribe if you're not subscribed yet, and then let me send you down the rabbit hole, and then send you to PubMed so you can do more research. You know,
absolutely.
That's what I like hilarious. About like you don't hold back on the information either, right? So every time I watch a video, I gotta pause and like, wait a minute, I don't know this shit. Yeah. And then I got to go somewhere to do more research. And then I come back, right? And then I finally understand what you're talking about on your level of nootropics, right? And sometimes it takes like 2 days, dude. Like I learned so much about uridine monophosphate from you. And every time I watch one video, I got to pause it 3 times to just catch up on like, what the hell is this guy talking about? But that's ultimately what but I love that, right? You know, there's only a select few people in this planet who still inspires me to learn. And that's why I keep following your stuff. So I'm looking forward to all those smart drugs or not videos. Those are going to be epic, I'm sure.
We're doing Bezos next, man.
Oh man, that's gonna be epic. I'm sure he's on TRT too. Yeah, copious
100%.
amount. Yeah,
100%.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right,
Thanks.
brother. Well, look, man, it's been a pleasure hanging out with you.
For sure.
Thank you so much for all the content that you put out. Steve mentioned you should sub to his channel because the dude has information on there you're just not going to find, elsewhere on the web. When I get stumped on things, I end up on Steve's channel and kind of do the same thing. Like I'm stopping the video and going and researching and just doing some heavy thinking. So go check out Vigorous Steve at all of his various places, which you can find by just letting Google reveal Vigorous Steve everything.
Exactly.
Any last words, man?
Not really. I mean, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. I'm sure we'll, over the next couple of weeks, we'll come up with some more questions, and then it's your turn to make an appearance on my channel again.
All right.
All right.
Love that.
We'll see in the comments, and then we'll schedule another one. And fingers crossed, this internet is not going to fail us yet again.
Yes. Yeah. I think it worked out a little better this time.
We'll fix it. The editor will fix it. Thanks so much for having me on, man. I'll talk to you soon.
You got it, brother. Later.
Thanks, buddy. Take care. Peace.
All right. See ya.